Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you here. In this episode, we are talking to Dr. Kai Matthews, who is an educator, researcher, and founder of the Liberatory Classroom, which is dedicated to helping educators design learning spaces where students can fully realize their humanity. Currently, she is a research director at UCLA's Center for the Transformation of Schools. Kai, I am so excited that you are here because you and I are on the same page when it comes to helping teachers with their social and emotional learning, basically, so they can show up for their students, but also for themselves as well. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. And love your podcast. I love that you're focusing on mindsets because I feel like at the bottom of systems change, what like foundationally needs to happen is us shifting how we think, our deep held beliefs and assumptions about the work that we do and the students and how we engage them. So I think it's a perfect combination coming together. So thank you.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you so much. So are they going back to, sort of education as like to how it was 30 years ago? Is that the idea? Like in the way that you teach kids, have there been radical shifts in that direction, do you think, or is that where it is going?
I don't think it's ever changed. I
Okay.
don't that's the problem. I think the way that we teach students now is the same way that my mom taught students and
Right.
in the same way that my grandma taught students. Uh and it hasn't changed. So I don't think there is a going back to. We haven't emerged whole scale like or yeah as a collective into better ways of teaching and learning, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's pockets though. There's definitely pockets. There's definitely schools that are reimagining what it means to be student centered, reimagining what it means to be the teacher versus the learner, and really engaging in like adult world issues with their students so that they are emerging out of their school prepared to just
Yeah.
be humans
Yeah.
in society. Um,
Definitely.
instead of students. And so that is happening, but there's not a large scale effort to make that happen. There's not any like statewide or national wide agency to do that work. And it's really because the folks who can afford a uh a free, equitable, um, engaging, liberatory type of education, they can afford it. They can afford to move. They can afford to navigate the system. They can petition to get their child an inter-district waiver or an out-of-district waiver. So it's as long as it continues to work for this select few. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't work for the many. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work for the masses, because some with the loudest voice are saying that no, this works for us. We
Yeah.
can we can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're the minority, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, same here. You have private schools and the parents that can afford to put those kids into private schools get the advantage.
Do
That's
so.
it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's just how,
And that's the crazy part, is because then
yeah.
then why make it mandatory?
Yeah,
Right? But like,
right?
if we're gonna say that, well, this will be based off of, because here in the States, a lot of the funding is for school funding is based off of property taxes. So already
Mhm.
it's slanted. It's
Yeah.
already slanted. Already the haves are gonna have, and the nots are gonna not have.
Yeah.
And um, and it's just like, well, you're forcing us to be here. Like by law, if you're
Yeah.
under the age of 18, you got to be in school And so at this point, when we're forcing kids to be there, and we know that these are not places where kids feel safe, we know that this is not places where kids feel like they belong. We know that in America, the school to prison pipeline is a very real thing that impacts primarily Black and brown children, that leads them straight to jail through our K-12 system. It really just becomes a question of like, is this on purpose? Like, why are we, if we're going to do harm, and their life outcomes might be better if we're not engaging in this system, then why force them to engage? I don't know. And I think, and I believe that, we still want to have um, this mechanism or this method of being able to socialize individuals and being able to provide this theoretical step up. But for more and more kids, when their life outcomes are worsened because of their engagement with the K-12 system, it's time for us to be like, what are we doing? How are we harming instead of uplifting
That's
the
it.
youngest, the most vulnerable of us?
It's often said, right? Like the way to control a society is to uneducate them, right?
I
Don't
love
make
this quote.
them.
Yes, yes. I think it's like the quickest way to change an entire society in a single generation is to change the way it educates its children.
That's right. It's
I
exactly
love that because, and in America, we have a very particular history around doing that.
Yep.
We did that first
South
with
Africa
Native
too.
Yes, we did that first with Native Americans, pulled them out of their
Yep.
tribes, put them in boarding schools, cut their hair, changed their clothing, told them that they were savages. Like the saying in America at that time was, uh, kill the savage, save the man.
Yeah.
Like that was the idea, is that if we can take all of their cultural history and cultural perspective and force it out of them with, you know, our European Christian
Yeah.
ways of being and knowing, and then we will effectively make them men.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's
Here,
crazy.
like there's quotes from when because obviously all the Black South Africans were segregated, and politicians were like, well, they don't need an education when all they're going to do is just work on the farms, basically, right? Like that's in writing.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my
and
God.
you think of all the minds that have been lost. Like that is what really, to me, is the most tragic. It's just the minds that have been lost, and
Yes.
the ability to change the world has been lost, because
Yes.
it comes through an education. It comes through learning about who you are and learning to think. And
Right.
yeah,
Yes, and like
tragic.
totally agree. Like so many of our societal issues and problems could have been solved by a group of folks who
Yep.
were effectively pushed out and or like suppressed
Yep.
in this system. And it's just like, why aren't we doing this? Is the benefit of the whole right here. This is the rising tide rises all boats. This is the sum of all of us that is represented in these educational spaces. When you have a failing K-12 system, there is not much left for you. There's a time clock. Then there's a timer then on um how well your society is going to function, and at the point in which it will become destabilized. And I equate this to exactly what's happening right now, like with book bannings,
Yep.
with anti-DI movement, with like wanting to non-educators wanting to really have a say on and dictate what's happening in the classroom, like towards a particular agenda that doesn't actually feed, nourish, or support children. It is to control. right? Like
Yes.
this is the most dangerous thing for folks who want total power and complete power, is to have an educated electorate.
Yep.
And
That's right.
this is a long game. This is the long game that's being played, and it's scary to watch. And I can't say this is the beginning of it, right? Like, but I do feel it's coming to a head. It's you know,
No, it is. It is.
they finally are amassing enough support
Yeah.
to really like be bold with their language, um, and bold in their actions as well.
No, I always find it interesting because one of my students she's in grade 11, she's reading for her curriculum, The Underground Railroad by
Mm,
Colson Whitehead, I think. And
yeah,
it's all based on, slavery in the United States. And I just think to myself, I highly doubt they would allow that people to read that because in the States, because it's not painting people in a
right.
great light at all, and
Yeah,
it's showing the loss of the mind, the loss of what could have been for so many of these people who had to experience that. And it's yeah, and it's like you say, I don't know. I hope people rise up and start to realize what's happening. I don't know. It's, because it's like you say, they're when you don't educate, that's why we don't educate them also on financial literacy, entrepreneurship, believing that you can do better, you can be better, you can be more than where you came from.
yes. And you're more than also just this standardized test, right?
Yes.
There is so much more. Like it always boggles my mind during when tax season rolls around how did I not learn this in school? Like, how is this not a man? If you're going to require that I pay taxes, don't you think that it would be mandatory to learn how to do this in school, in grade school? No.
Yeah.
Don't you think it would be mandatory to look for us to learn how to do finance, how to invest in the stock
Just
market?
gonna
No,
say how to invest. How about that?
no. How to buy a house, how to
Yeah.
determine, like, all of these things that again, and I think that this is what liberatory classroom, our liberatory education really is. I define it as something that is benefiting the whole of you, not just the academic student version of you, not just the K-12 version of you, but like it is actually preparing you, giving you the life skills, the knowledge, the
Yeah.
tools to navigate society and to be a human in the world that has to exist in these outside systems. So it is something that gives you that also is attending to your own growth mindset. It's something that is also saying that you are a problem solver. It's teaching you how to be creative, how to rise out of circumstances, how to look and properly assess a situation and be able to make decisions that are advantageous, like on behalf of yourself, on behalf of your family, and on behalf of your community. Like be able to be a change maker.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the reasons maybe why that it's not. It's maybe a feared thing. Like I can definitely say fear is a theme that is going around right now. Like this is the way in which we move. There's different ways in which you can motivate and move people. And right now the collective theme is like fear, right? I'm going to make you fearful of movement, of growth, fearful of trying and taking on new challenges, because you haven't experienced them yet, because you don't know what to do. That's a scary thing, and people don't like to move in fear. And that's what really the classroom should be these places in which I can experience and learn things in a safe space
Yeah.
where I don't have to be fearful. It's low stakes, not instead of the high stakes of the
Yeah.
world while I'm out here. Now I'm by myself, I'm outside of my parents' house, and my money, my livelihood, my interactions with other folks are really literally depending on this. Like the learning needs to be happening for those 12 years that we have students, that we that we force them to be there.
Exactly.
And so, like I think that that like bell hooks and Paulo Freire, what they're talking about with like a liberatory education is really when they say a practice of freedom, is that in the classroom I'm supposed to be able to practice making my own decisions, having my own thoughts, and testing that in a safe space and adjusting with the environment, right?
Yeah.
And not have it have these detrimental life impacts and life outcomes when I'm just like 13.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. No, it's so
um,
oh my gosh. Kai could speak to you for like hours,
don't
I think.
have anyone testing. Yeah, we don't have anyone testing that, or we're taking away all of the curriculum, all of the things that would allow them to go through these experiences before they are reach adulthood. We're handicapping a lot of folks, and
Yeah.
it's not what's the word I was looking for? That part is actually the criminal part.
Yeah. It is the criminal part, 100%, because you can't see that by doing that, you are stunting the possible minds of someone out there who could just like change everything for your country, who could make it just so much better, but you're stifling that creativity, that ability for them to kind of learn and go in that direction. That's
Yeah,
what I think it
yeah,
is it's very difficult, yeah. But I
and
hope, I'm sure that the thing is, I think with where you are is just trying to target as many people as you can, as many kids as you can, to promote that growth within them and be like, you can do this, and you are, you can do anything you want, and like don't like stop learning, and
yeah.
right, like
But it first starts
believing.
with teachers.
It does.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah,
And if they can't, they have to almost find different ways of saying it,
yeah, yeah.
bringing
Yeah.
it.
They also have to like believe it, right? Like to
Yeah.
your point, like mindsets around what does growth look like even for me? It's
Yeah.
not just I'm just trying to promote a growth mindset for my students. Like in a school or in a classroom environment, there are structures and systems that place teachers in boxes as well. And
Yes.
so this is part of us being not just someone who is distilling, the Common Core curriculum. We're also supposed to be advocates for this work. I don't separate the teaching profession from advocacy at all, because
No.
you have to have some sort of lens of where I am being entrusted, number one, to care for these students, but also I'm being entrusted to properly support and prepare the future generations to be the change I want to see in
Yes.
society.
To show them what
That's
that
my
looks
thing.
like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You have to model that, but for them,
Mhm.
because that's how they will learn it. That's how, by
Right.
seeing what you do, they will learn that too. So no, definitely. No, I think it's great, the liberatory classroom. And I have no doubt that even with these challenges, like you will just continue to move forward and touch, what as many lives as you can. That's the key. And as many teachers as you can in order to help them, continue to help the kids grow, and like we said, how do you define liberatory education, and what distinguishes it from traditional education models?
Yeah, for me, I really think about liberatory education as something that is contributes to my well-being as an individual in every sense of the word. And so it helps me to not only thrive as a learner, but it prepares me with like the skills and the knowledge and the tools to really engage in the world as just a human being, as someone who's going to have to navigate the structures and the systems that society has put up in order to, be a person who is in society. And so that means I think that education needs to be a safe space where I can test my ideas, where I can leverage my own power, where I'm given ownership and opportunity to exercise that freedom, right? So that means I have to have some type of choice and voice inside of the classroom so I can be navigating that. Um, and I think it also means that what I'm learning in the classroom is also preparing me to be creative. It's preparing me to be a problem solver and to look at the world around me, and to better understand it, and to also be able to combat like issues and challenges that are advantageous, on my own behalf. So making decisions on that benefit me, my community, my family at large.
Right, right. No, definitely. What would you say like are some of the common challenges that educators might face when trying to implement liberatory practices, and how can they overcome them? Because I know now, especially, things are shifting a little bit in the education space in 2025. So yeah, what advice would you give educators today?
I think the most common thing is that it's subconscious,
Mm.
what we're doing and how we're teaching. And a lot of teachers teach the way that they were taught and how they were trained also.
Yeah.
And we are not doing a good job of kind of breaking that cycle because that's all we kind of know. Our curriculum is also actually very much structured to be teacher directed, for teachers to own that knowledge. And we're running on the assumption that in order for kids to do any type of work, they must first be downloaded with all of the information first. Whereas like something along the lines of like project-based learning or liberatory education is that you're putting up circumstances and you're putting up environments where students get to explore, they get to assess, and then determine ways of knowing, ways of being, themselves. And I don't think we're comfortable as the adults in the room. We're comfortable with doing that because then there's a diversity of answers. There's a diversity of modes and methods that are implemented in the classroom that could be as individual as the amount of students that you have in your classroom. And how do we measure that?
Yeah.
How do we engage that, when we have one standardized test, when we have one way of saying that this is the grade that you got and we have one skill that we're measuring and testing for. And so I think it's really about opening up the minds of, not just teachers, it's all of the adults who are creating the spaces that kids learn in order to say that there are more expansive ways of letting students learn in the classroom. And even if it's not, and that it is possible, right? Like, and it's what is always baffles me is that, um, this is what like some of the great theorists and philosophers of education have always told us, that kids are natural, innate learners, that we as human beings, the way that we naturally evolve is through creativity, through being able to problem solve, be able to see things that aren't currently there and imagine them. So imagine solutions for them, imagine like pathways forward. That's how we've evolved to the places that we are now. And what our systems don't do is allow for that natural evolution to just take place. We're at every corner, like we need to get out of our own way. Um, and so I think the first thing that needs to happen, the bare minimum of what needs to happen is just change our thoughts that it needs to be a one size fits all model. Like, and that there is actually, there are actually opportunities and ways for our students to arrive whole into the learning space, and for them to have ownership over their learning without the teacher, going crazy, without it
Yeah.
being chaos. But it would take creativity on our part, right? The same thing that we're kind of shutting off students from, is we're shutting ourselves off from, because we're refusing to imagine something different. And it really would just take this much time, effort, and energy to be like, how can we create and imagine something more expansive, more inclusive, more diverse for our students to engage in? We've seen the data. We
Yeah.
know it. It's been this way for decades. We know that the more diverse you are from our standard student, that you will do worse in our schools. And I don't know how much more we need to see in order to know that, okay, as a country that is becoming more increasingly diverse, how are we going to support the next generation of students if we can't build systems that are as expansive as they are?
No.
So we're at this place where we ourselves need to tap into our own creativity. And I think that's what teachers get into this practice for in the first place. They love to design and build a space and an environment and a curriculum that like engages students in learning. Like that is what drives most teachers. It's not obviously the paycheck or the admiration, like
Yeah.
those are hard fought once we get into the profession. And so like being able to keep that with us as we're moving through and matriculating and becoming tenured in this pipeline and profession, I think is one of the most essential things in order to continue being able to push on providing something that is like freedom dreaming for your students.
Yeah, I love what you said there, because it's so, so true. And I think it's important for teachers to know, if you're listening out there and you're a teacher, that just because you might be working with a colleague who is sort of stuck in more of a fixed mindset and is still just giving out, a worksheet to do this and that and the other, you can still choose to change the way you are looking at how you teach your kids. You can go and follow influencers that deal with, inquiry-based learning and project-based learning and how to change it up and how to make it more student-centered. And you can try things even though there might be people at school that aren't doing that, right? Sometimes you have to do it for yourself, and that change could happen today. It just
Right.
because you were different yesterday, you can always show up differently today.
That can change lesson by lesson, day by day. And don't be a failure, right?
Yes.
Like you want to at least try. And there are lessons to be learned in the failure. And being very honest with your class, like, oh well, that didn't work. What do you think that went wrong? Like, how can we make this better? Like that, even that sort of self-reflective inquiry process, going through that publicly with your students is one of the like things that they'll carry with them after they leave your classroom, more so than everything going perfectly right. Like it's sometimes it's it's in the failure, it's in the mistakes learned, and it's in the deep reflection afterwards. That's why when my class, every time we would do a project afterwards, we would spend at least a couple days on deeply reflecting what happened over the past like weeks, or sometimes in for bigger projects, months. Like what happened? Like what did we just do? Like where did we start? How did we end up here? Like what was beneficial about it? What would we change? Right. And I'm also getting ideas for the next time. I
Yeah.
need that critical feedback. Like, we want students to be good at delivering and receiving critical feedback, but how much are we as teachers also receiving that from our students, from the community that we're serving? That's the most important. That's the most critical feedback that we can get. And so, like, leaning into a little bit of the unknown is the scary part, but it pays off tremendously when you're in the classroom, in terms of just allowing your students to show up and have that agency and ownership, but also in your own developmental growth as a teacher and a learner in the space.
Just you saying that, it makes me realize that for so many years of my own teaching, I had such a fixed mindset around that because if I knew a lesson went terribly wrong. I would just pretend that that's how it was supposed to go, right? I would never, and now I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and just say to the kids, wow, like there were some real flaws in that lesson. Can anyone tell me why they think that lesson didn't go well? I'll probably have one kid stand up and be like, actually, I thought it went okay. But I would, you always have that one student. But I, as a teacher, would definitely encourage other teachers to be like, I think, that lesson didn't go really according to plan. What do you think? What do you think happened? I think that is a brilliant idea.
Yes. Teaching your students how to take failure, like that is the most exemplary model of growth
Yeah.
mindset. Like, because you're trying to encourage your student after they get a D on a test, like you got to try harder. But if you're giving up after your failed lesson,
Yeah.
why should I continue to try? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're watching, they're learning, and it's very much like I'm hearing what you say, but I'm also seeing what you do and how
Yes.
you model that in the classroom. And we got to be just as um encouraging to ourselves as we are to students around try again, even if you've made mistakes, even if you failed. It's just a lesson. I don't have failures, I just have lessons.
Yeah. Love
And
that.
that is also, I'm explicit about that. I'm open about that. And they can see like, oh, look how she navigated that terrible class, like that terrible like lesson yesterday with grace, with curiosity, with persistence. And like that needs to be not just modeled, but like explicitly talked about, because students don't know how to handle and receive that type of um uh that type of misstep. Sometimes they don't understand, like it hurts. Like our failures are also definitely tied to our egos.
Yeah, they
And
take it
so
personally, right? Like there's something you
yeah,
on, right?
you gotta be able to show them like, okay, yeah, it does hurt. Like I'm very like I put a lot of time into that lesson
Yeah.
and I thought it was gonna go a different way. And but I'm showing them like it can hurt and it can bruise my ego a little bit, but it's also to my benefit to speak to it and to like examine it, not just hide it, shovel it under the rug, like bring it out to the light.
Yeah.
That's what I want my students to be able to do.
The students are always watching. That's what we
Always.
forget, that we're modeling constantly how to handle difficult situations, how to handle, maybe difficult, challenging people, even just challenging students in the class, right? How you handle that is modeling to the other kids. This is how you can handle if you're confronted with a challenging person sometimes.
Oh my gosh, I will never forget. I was observing a classroom and they were doing their social emotional learning unit. So it was like something around like, like it was something around care, like care for individuals. It was very much focused on like being aware, like self-aware, but aware of folks in your space.
Yeah.
But then the larger theme was like just caring about other individuals. And there was a student that was, doing something, talking out of turn or talking while the teacher was talking. And the way that this teacher addressed that student was like she did not care about him being like thoroughly embarrassed in front of his classmates, did not care about what he was like talking about or anything. Like it was like she just eviscerated him in the
Wow.
class, like yes, in front of everybody. And I get like, she's also kind of nervous. I'm sitting there in the back of the classroom observing, so I want to acknowledge that, right? Like there she's also being observed and on display, and she's also like nervous and wanting this to go well. But like how do you address a student in that manner with that tone and then go back into your lesson around care for others? And it was so inauthentic to me. And
Mhm.
the students felt it. The students like were just like,
Yeah.
is this really what, are you just teaching this because this is just like on the agenda for today, or is this like something
Yes.
that we need to be doing like in life? Like it just doesn't seem like it's actually something that take up as an adult, because I just saw you completely dismantle the emotions, dismantle the emotions of a student in our classroom. And for what? Like the reaction was not equal to what was happening. And so obviously I don't know the history. Maybe there was a whole long history of that student and that teacher, but those are the things that I'm mindful of. Those are the things that build culture in your classroom, even just like a culture of learning and a culture of folks who trust each other enough to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know, and to continue learning in a classroom. It takes a vulnerable space to
Yeah.
say that we're going to be in a learning environment, because it says that if I'm learning, then I don't currently know. And for me to be able to admit that as a child and as an adult, means that I have to have a space where I feel like I belong, where I feel like I'll be uplifted, and that my weaknesses won't be kind of, weaponized against me.
Yeah. Once you go into a safe space, right, then you lose that fight or flight feeling that then can allow you to learn, can allow you to embrace the environment. And I think it's like you said, teachers are that we also have to learn how to manage our emotions, because we're teaching the students how to manage their emotions, right? And
Right.
we can't guarantee that they might be we don't know what they're getting at home. So the best thing we can do is model it ourselves and teach ourselves. Like we're not saying that you have to know it automatically, but start learning. How do you calm down when you get anxiety? How do you not take something personally when a student says this is boring or this is terrible or whatever?
Right.
Right. We have to learn ourselves as well. What are the strategies that we can teach the kids the same
Yeah.
strategies?
And it's not all about even just like swallowing it, right? Like and then just suppressing it. That you need to explain to your students what you're doing, like
Yeah.
in that process. So you worked all night on a lesson, you're presenting it. A student says, "This is boring." Ah, hurts. Like, ah. Sometimes
Nice.
I would do that. Sometimes I would just like show my students, like, "Ah, that hurt." I was like, "Dang, like, damn, Daniel." Like that really, that was really painful. I was like, and then, I was like, even though I would say, I think there's a better way for you to communicate that this lesson is not your favorite lesson. Like keeping in mind that I also have feelings too, because I'm also human. What is the most like socially, emotionally appropriate way to convey to me respectfully that maybe this lesson could be more engaging? Right? I could say that to him in the moment, but I think too often we are afraid to be vulnerable with our students, and we're
Yeah.
afraid to show that emotion that we were actually hurt. And so the emotion that comes out is like anger and
Yeah.
discipline, and like get back in line with just saying, not saying anything. If you don't like it, I don't actually care. 'Cause that's what we're really saying when we're just saying, when we're ignoring a comment like that, or if we are addressing it with anger, or just talking about like, oh, uh, you need to be quiet while I'm talking, while the teacher
Yeah.
is talking. This is, disrespectful, or just do it. Just
Yeah.
do it because that's what I said to do it. That's what we're really telling them, is that we don't care about your opinion. When in fact the complete opposite is true. I care so much, it has literally hurt my feelings. And also I want to know why it's not engaging. And then also putting it back on them to answer and to explain, because any kid could say, this is dumb,
Yeah.
I'm bored, I don't want to do this. Why? What? Tell me why. Having them go through the mental process and be like, why do I feel the emotion that I feel, and why did I feel it so much that I had to say it out loud in the classroom, is having them do some critical thinking processes and reflection on their own state of being, right? And this is being self-aware. So
Yeah.
this is the ways in which I'm teaching social emotional learning, not so explicitly, not just saying this is what it looks like, this is how you model it, this is the definition, um but showing them through my actions, and then actually asking questions, or having an activity where they have to engage in that. that type of self
100%.
awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. It's so true. And I feel that, you know, we're always learning, right? So going out there and trying to figure out how can we model that behavior when it comes up, and it's okay to be vulnerable. And often that's when kids make a better connection with us, is when
Yeah.
we are more vulnerable, for sure. I'm curious with the project-based learning, because I know we've talked a bit about project-based learning. I know you're a big fan of that as well. How does project-based learning intersect with the social justice in your workshops, and why do you
Mm,
feel the combination is so important?
yeah. I feel like project-based learning is just such a good vehicle to deliver like liberatory education and liberatory type of activities, because it allows students to um the structure of how projects are built, right? Like the very essence of it is that we're not just downloading them with a bunch of information. And then there was this great video that I show in like all of my trainings, like the difference between project-based learning and project-oriented learning. And
Okay.
so project-oriented learning is more of the traditional where we would go through a whole unit plan, and we do all the tests, and we talk about all the definitions, and we do the very building and scaffolding of the skills in order for you to do a project at the end. So at the end of it, you're going to do um like the example in the video, and I'm from California, so this rang true for me as well, is that we would build these missions. So in
Okay.
elementary school, learning about all the different missions, like missionaries, and like the missions that were built across the state is part of like our curriculum for
Okay.
Californians. And you learn all about them, all the different priests and the saints that are associated with them, where they were, what region they're in, who they served, if they had any type of specialty that was coming out of it. You learn all about that. And then at the end of that project, you build a lifelike mission, like a 3D model of the mission. And that is like, I learned all the stuff first, and then I did the project. And it was in the example they give in the video is that like you do project oriented learning is that you're doing all of the learning and then doing the project instead of the project running the learning. So an example of this is one of my favorite projects I did, and when I was the 8th grade teacher, was this law and order project. And we were doing these what's it called, mock trials, and it was going to be in front of real judges at the San Diego Supreme Court downtown over 2 days. And these are trials, these are cases that were pulled from the headlines, right? So these are real things that are happening around the country that they're going to be able to kind of deliberate on. And at the same time, we're learning like 14th Amendment, First Amendment rights around the Constitution. And day one, they're thrown in like to the gauntlet. Like we split up the class down the middle. We're saying you're on this side, you're on this side, let's take a debate. Cold, right? Like they don't know anything about the topic, we're just throwing it up on the board.
Wow.
And it's yes, and it's immediate, right? Like you don't have to, like you're learning as you go, and then doing that experience, you've learned where you don't feel comfortable. You
Yeah.
also have learned where you wish you had other language to say the thing that you wanted to say, or you wish you had known more about this conversation. And so that is prepared. That is the very start. Day one of the trial is like that's not the actual trial at the end, but like being thrown into the work and saying, let's see where your creativity comes up. Let's see where you're pulling from background knowledge around around the subject. Then you can properly assess you yourself, not me as the teacher. You yourself can see where you're like getting stuck, or you're like, I don't know that much about this rule or this policy or this case. And I don't actually, maybe I don't have an opinion, or maybe I have a lot of opinions about this thing. Uh, so it allows them then to like go down to through the project, and we've had people from different lawyers come in and do uh, talks with the students, and people from the Innocence Project look at, like, this is how you examine a case and see if people were wrongly convicted for these crimes. And so I think all of that is while you're doing the work of the project is creating its own learning. And yeah, that is a lot more maybe chaotic, because you don't know what you're going to get, right? You just don't know what you're going to get. And I feel our compulsion as teachers to want to prepare students as much as possible so that they can do well. Um, but but sometimes the preparation hinders them coming into a space with their own brilliance.
Yeah.
um and so that's what we want to leave room for. We want to scaffold, yes, but we also want to leave these appropriate gaps, right, that allow students to make the jump themselves, um and come up with something that you wouldn't have thought of, um and to feel confident and to grow in that space. That's what they're growing towards. It's not just I'm growing through the information that you're downloading into me or that you're placing in front of me. I'm having to make some type of brave movement, brave connection in the space, pull from my past knowledge, pull from my cultural
Yeah.
knowledge. I'm going to have to
Think on my feet.
yes, think on my feet. Like that is what, because in the real world, and this is what we say, like at High Tech High, we would always say, like, we want our students to have adult world problems, not real world problems, because they are in the real world. It's kind of like, dismissing that they are living human beings in full capacity
Yeah.
already. But and we want them to be prepared for the adult world challenges that they will see when they get out there. And there is no script. There is no playbook. There isn't a consigned curriculum that we go through, and then they do the project. A lot of times, almost all the time, the way we get through and the way we move through life is that the project is the learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that is so true. I mean, that's so true for life in general, right? You come up with a
Yes.
project, you put it together, and then you learn. I mean, it can be as simple as the project of decluttering your house or
Yes.
decluttering a
Yes.
space, right? You're going to learn. You're going to learn what works, what doesn't work.
Yes.
How can I
Filing your
organize? Yeah.
taxes. Yeah, I gotta do file, and now I'm gonna learn a whole bunch of stuff. Like the doing the work for the experience or for the project itself is how we as humans learn. And so putting that is the realest type of education you can provide. That's why I feel project-based learning is the realest type of education you can provide in a classroom. It's like it never nothing else works like this instead of but beyond K-12 education. Nothing else works conscripted like the way that we set it up. And so why are we doing this? It stunts them for sure.
Definitely. And I think like if as teachers, you can, even if your school is quite constricted on how it wants you maybe to teach, there could still be opportunities for project-based learning in other subjects or other areas. And I would encourage any teacher to just keep learning some strategies, follow project-based learning influencers on Instagram or out there, in Facebook, whatever, and learn a few things that you could implement because they really are just so beneficial to the kids. It doesn't mean you have to do it for everything, but even just trying it for history or, something else that you're doing. It doesn't have to be for the core subjects.
And I think like a good thing to ask is like, what do I want my students to experience? Not
Yes.
just like, I know that what will my students do, what my students be able to do is big, and making sure that, we're hitting these standards that are part of the curriculum. But at the end of the day, you want your experiences is what students walk away with. And so beyond the skill of what is it that I want them to have encountered and gone through, and then come out the other side of this lesson or this project. And as soon as we start building experiences for our students instead of lessons, then I think that that is like the first step in building something that is more comprehensive in our classrooms. Yeah.
I love that. What experience do you want them to have? That's powerful. And it's so true. I think that's a great way for where place for a teacher to start. When you're thinking of almost your learning objective, be like, what's your experience objective here? Like, what experience do you
Yeah.
want them to have? That's so fantastic. Um, so with advice, like what advice, Kai, would you give to educators who have been following you on Instagram, which we are of course going to pop into the show notes, and maybe they're new to the liberatory classroom or liberatory education, but they want to start transforming their classrooms a little bit, maybe creating a certain space for it. Like, what does that look like? Where could they start?
Oh, I like I think we as like physical beings always orient ourselves to what the physical space looks like. And so if you have your desk in rows, stop.
Yeah.
It's hard to manage. It's hard to manage. And trust me, I have worked with a lot of like first year teachers who having them in rows is just easier to manage. And when you're a first year teacher, it is like you're just trying to get through. Like you're trying to, be able to teach the lesson and have a day where maybe you don't have to navigate the interpersonal dynamics of the classroom. But the benefit of having, desk in groups, of having a space in the back where you can do circle or the kids can, it's a more flex space, automatically lends itself to my mind, right? Like if I'm a student coming in, I'm 13, I'm 12 coming in, it already lends itself to being more, having more options, having more creative and collaborative freedom. And so the very first thing you can do to start transforming your classroom is transform the physical space. If you don't have student work up, if you're not displaying student work, I don't know why we stopped that in elementary school. I don't know, not everywhere, but here, traditionally, it's rare that you see a middle school classroom or a high school classroom that has student work displayed. No. Have their work displayed. Let them know that their work is important enough for other eyes to see, and that it's actually that it is a work of art, right? That also allows them to be tied to the space, like have some ownership of the space, that this is a student safe space because it is here, like created and decorated for us by us type of thing. And then flex and practice with, ease in student voice and choice. There is a difference between asking students a question to a pre-described answer, like that's something that has a pre-described answer. So like, what is 2 plus 2, or, what is the angle of this triangle, degree of this triangle? Like those have very specific answers. And I think sometimes teachers stop at that level. Like, oh, I called on 20 of my kids today. Like they all contributed to the space. Their voices were heard. I mixed it up, but these are answers that are not authentic, right? They're not authentic to who they are as individuals. They're not lending. I see inclusion as having some type of skin in the game for students,
Right.
giving something of myself, lending it to the space, that either helps promote the learning, that helps give a different perspective that is uniquely mine. And coming and source for me. Only I could give this to the space. That is what authentic inclusion looks like. And so at what points are we asking students to authentically include their voice? But there's other ways that we can include them is through their time, through their knowledge. So having students like participate in teaching small portions of the class, doing table teachings with their fellow students. I think is a way to really start to break through and allowing students to have more space, take up more space.
Yeah.
So about how much space do students get to take up in your class. Is it only the physical space that occupies their desk, or is it more substantial in terms of the air that they get to share? So voice, choice, how many authentic decisions do students get to make for the hour that you have them, or for the full day if you're in elementary school that you have them? How many choices? And if it's less than 10, I don't know. I feel like you and I there start small. Maybe that's the first part, is doing an assessment on yourself, right? Go through your lesson as normal, go through your traditional classroom day, and then reflect. Just one day. It doesn't have to be an extensive experiment. You don't have to be a
Yeah,
researcher.
yeah.
But just reflect on how many times did did I have space for students to authentically contribute their voice or authentically make a choice about the learning that they're doing. And sometimes it's very low and sometimes it's zero. And from there, you can start thinking about what are the tweaks I can make to the lesson tomorrow to just allow students to show up more whole. Because what happens is when we don't allow that space, there is a narrow box in which we're allowing students to show up. And it's just as my math student, not as Kai, the sister, the soccer player, the great builder, like not all of these other things that are make a person. We allow them to just show up as my math student. And so the more space that we give them to allow their choice to come in, to allow their voice to come in, we're allowing them to show up into our classrooms more whole. And that's what we should think about it. That's how we should think about it.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of when I see a video of a teacher who is still reading off just of an overhead projector, or something that's been on, or you have to copy this down, or that sort of idea, and thinking of, can you get the kids more involved? Can the kids have a voice? Can there be any collaboration in order to get the information across? Because often when you're just sort of it chalk and talk, right? That old term, right? When you're just the one doing all the talking, it does make it more difficult for the students to want to sit there and learn. And I think that's true for adults too. When you go to a talk, if the person just like keeps talking and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I need to do something. I need something. I need to, even just if I talk to my partner for a second, like,
Yeah. Yeah, break it up. Like have more multiple your voice. The teacher should not be the only thing that's contributing to my learning in the classroom.
yeah,
Point blank. You as a teacher should not be the only point of contact. And also your standardized books or curriculum or textbooks should also not be the only point of contact. Like there needs to be something beyond the text and beyond the teacher that is contributing to my learning. And it seems hard because you're going to have to manage the movement of bodies and the different opinions, but that is easier than carrying the entire weight of the classroom by yourself.
yeah,
And you have to balance those out. Like it seems easier because that's how we were taught, again, and that's what we've seen, and this is what we know. And so it seems like it would be easier to come in and teach every day, being the sole proprietor of knowledge. But that's not actually not. Your classroom becomes so much more, not just engaging, but easier and lighter and fun for you as well as a teacher, when you can release some of the pressure that you have as like, I'm going to be the owner of truth in the classroom. No, like my students are also going to carry the weight of engaging students. That's not all my job either. They're going to do some of that work. They're going to engage each other. They're going to contribute to this learning. We're going to take, some
yep,
different pathways. You don't have to do it all. That scaffolding will come from the students themselves.
exactly. And I think look at what works the best and then just repurpose it, right? Like just, there's nothing wrong with rotating 5 different things that work.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, the kids really responded to this. Okay, we're going to file that away and we're going to use that again, right? Don't just use it with different topics. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to reinvent the wheel every day. It's just trial and error in the beginning and then seeing what works and doing that again because clearly the kids responded to that,
Mm-hmm.
and had a good time with that for sure. Um, Kai, this last question, I'm not going to ask it just because of I don't know, like, do you want me to ask it? Because I know we already talked about it kind of in the beginning, but I know with everything that's happening with the equity with the federal level, what do you think? Should we go with it or not?
Let's see. To promote. We can go with it. Wait, is it under the final thoughts? No, yes. It was right
It's the
before.
fund number 5 as a research director.
Yeah. Um, no, I think we could use probably a lot of what we had already talked about, but I think what I will say, or do you want to ask the question
Yeah,
first?
I'll need to ask the question. So are we good? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So Kai, just my final question here, like as a research director, oh, it's actually not my final question because I've got final thoughts. Okay, forget it. I'll come back. Let's start again. Okay. So Kai, as a research director, what initiatives are you currently focusing on to promote equity and transformation in education? I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, the work that I do at UCLA is really around educator diversity. And so ensuring that we, particularly in California, we are one of the most diverse states in the entire country.
Okay.
And so we are really focused on making sure that we have equitable representation so that our teachers in the classroom are reflecting the student body that we're serving. Um, and also with that, we know that diversity actually helps expand and broaden like every single industry. Fortune 500 companies know that you need to diversify, and those are the most successful. Is like if you don't diversify, then you're stagnant and you're not growing. You limit your potential to grow into other avenues. And so us as a system need to be able to support non-traditional educators from getting into the space, and what we also have to be very cognizant of what prevents them from getting in this space, right? Like the way in California to get into the teaching profession is a little confusing, and it's also very expensive. The traditional route is a post-baccalaureate degree, so you get your regular 4 years of education, your undergraduate, but then you also have to go and get a post-baccalaureate degree, which is your teaching credential. And the majority of other industries that require a post-baccalaureate degree pay teachers about 20% more
Wow.
than our starting teachers do. Um, and that is a huge, like, we're not able to attract top tier talent into the field because of the way it's perceived. It's perceived as a low paying job, one where you don't get inherent, like it's not really respected or
Mhm.
considered as professional. And that is what is contributing, the fact that we're not compensating teachers viably to contend with the cost of living here in California, but also across the country, is really limiting it to who it's available to, who this can even be a viable career option for. And we're doing ourselves a disservice by not making easier pathways into the profession. So that's one thing that I'm looking at is how can we, as a state in particular, have better structures and better systems to not only attract, but also support diverse educators, because those are the folks that will help lead our K-12 education system into the future with our increasingly diverse student population. I think also, though, looking at the ways in which we assess students has always been something that I'm passionate about. We need more more student-centered ways of assessing
Yeah.
what learning looks like
Yeah.
and how learning has happened. We need models that are more growth oriented, so looking at where I started and where I'm ending up, instead of just like, it's hard to make it to grade level when you entered seventh grade at like a fourth grade reading level, right? And so then that student is continuously just labeled failure, failure, failure all the way up because they're not meeting standard. But like, they started at a fourth grade reading level, maybe they're ending, high school at a 10th grade reading level. That's not nothing.
That's
That's
not
not nothing. They're still 2 years behind, but that growth needs to be honored and needs to be acknowledged. And it should be measured.
yeah.
Because I think, we measure what we find valuable. Like, right, we'll take stock of things that we think are important. And what we are inherently saying when we don't measure growth and we don't measure students' small wins and successes is that it's not valuable to us.
Yeah.
It's either you're here or you're nowhere. And that is also not an inclusive system.
Exactly. And also, you want to allow the student to feel that the pride of the fact that they've come up 4 or 5 grade like reading levels, right? As opposed to, oh, but you're still below grade level, right? No, you actually moved up all of these reading levels, right? You worked incredibly hard and you made such incredible progress, right? You want them to also feel that with hard work, things can get accomplished.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And that the effort wasn't all for naught. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we are continuing to, it's kind of what we talked about at the very beginning, is you want to model that the try is worth it, and
Yeah.
that there are benefits that come from um so incremental growth. Like, we're continuously just evolving and growing and getting better, and maybe we're not where we want to be, but it's a process that takes a long time, and that is still worthy of being honored and recognized.
Yeah. I love that. Well, on that note, I've got just a couple of final thoughts that I for you. So, Kai, I'm always interested in the answer to this question, but what advice would you give the 25-year-old version of yourself?
Oh my God. Wait, are you talking broadly speaking, or like teacher self,
It can be
or
broadly speaking or teaching. It can, yeah, it's up to you.
yeah. Mm. Okay. My 25-year-old self. It's always like younger self. And so 25 was a specific age. It's so specific.
I don't know. We can go with younger self if you
No, no,
want.
no, no. But I like the 20, because like at 25, you're kind of thinking like, oh, I'm an adult.
Yeah.
I'm a grown person. I know things. And then you get older and you're like, wow, I did not
I didn't
know
know.
what I did not know. I would, and I kind of gave this advice to a group of kids that I was talking to the other day, for like a career day for like Black History Month. And um, it was that it's sort of along the lines of be you fully, like we are. And I kind of gave the analogy of like, if we actually, think about that we're all just stardust, right? We're all just composites of the same, minerals and atoms, of collection of things. Like, we're all just a unique expression of the universe.
Yeah.
And that is so important to live out fully, because that is why we're here, right? Like you don't want to be anyone else than yourself, because it not only disrupts your own internal balance, but like the universal balance. Like, you were created individually and uniquely yourself in order to be different, to be a change maker in your own world, in your own sphere of influence. And I think, like, as a teacher, recognizing that you can do things differently in your classroom, even if it hasn't been shown to you, even if it hasn't been taught to you, even if you don't see great examples of how to do it. I think the ways in which you engage students can be uniquely your own, and uniquely beautiful. And so lean into that. Don't be basic.
Yeah.
Don't be traditional. Be original. And
That.
I think that's the what I would say.
Need that on a t-shirt. Don't be traditional, be original. Love that. That's brilliant. That is good advice. Yes, I think that's fantastic. And so as a mindset coach for teachers, I always tell the teachers I work with, it's so easy to focus on what went wrong in a week, but there are so many things that went right. So I would love to know, what was one of the highlights of your day or week? We're speaking on a Sunday, so yeah, day or week.
Yeah, my highlight is that, I think it's a very particular time. And so and then work is stressful and you can lose sight of what your individual body needs in order to be maintained, have a balance and for your own wellness. And so I'm grateful that this week I actually got outside and remembered, oh, the sun actually boosts my mood,
Yeah.
actually it increases my endorphins. Actually going for a brisk walk after a long day of meetings is the most relaxing thing, instead of just curling up into a ball on the couch. And so I think the highlight of this week was definitely that I remembered that,
Mm.
and I followed through on that and got outside after work hours for 4 days of this week. So which is an improvement of
That's
0
amazing.
days.
Good for you. I love that. Fantastic. No, hey, that is an absolute win. Getting outside, getting some in the middle of a little bit of nature, a little bit of sun, it's proven to, as you said, boost the endorphins. So that's amazing. Well, I'm so grateful for you, Kai, that you came on the show to join me today. And I just really appreciate your dedication to helping educators through the Liberatory Classroom. And may this year bring you peace, wisdom, strength, all of that great stuff to continue building a more just and human-centered education for all. I'm sending it through the waves.
I'm receiving all of it. Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
same to you. I'm receiving it and sending it back out into the world, right, and straight to you.
I'm receiving it. Yay! Thank you so much, Kai. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thank
So
you. I
great.
love this discussion.
Yeah, it really was. It's so easy to talk to you. I was actually thinking as I was talking to you that I want to, because I did a talk on social and emotional learning, and I want to do a podcast on not just the 5 pillars, but how teachers can implement um,
Mm.